Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. What a great day. We do know this is a sold-out full room. If there's an empty chair beside you, obviously let people in and have a seat. And there's some standing room in the back if you prefer to not be seated. Normally, I would say, look at those beautiful views out there from this window. And I think many of us know that this wildfire smoke and our summer air pollution can be quite challenging. And I think it's all connected and related to today's topic very dearly. So my name is Kristen Eulenbrock. I am the Executive Director for the Institute for Science and Policy. If I've had not the pleasure of meeting you, please come say hi to me at some point. We are part of the Denver Museum of Nature and Science. We have been around since 2018. And we like to take on the really hard problems that are happening here in the state. And we do not shy away from talking about the politics, the values, and all the nuances of what does it mean to work in climate and energy and water and natural resources, public health, AI technology, all these really simple problems that we have. But a lot of our grounding and the root of the work that we do is we ground it in science and evidence, because we believe that is how we make better decisions as a society, but also that it revolves people, and it revolves really hard conversations about what we should be doing or what we could be doing and what people's different values are. And so that's a little bit about why we're the Institute and why we exist here at this wonderful institution that's been around for 125 years. We have the ability to bring people together in a room like this. I look around and I see people, different ages, different backgrounds from those of you I know. Some of you work in the water space. Some of you, water is maybe tangentially related to your jobs. Some of you, water is just of interest because it's the thing that provides us with life. And so I love the fact that we can bring folks together. Hopefully you'll get a chance to meet someone new and talk to someone new today. So I would love to do a couple quick thanks before I introduce our topic and let our speakers take it over today. There's so many people who work with us behind the scenes who make this possible. A huge thanks to my Institute colleagues, Tricia and Steve and Jordan and Kate and Max Newmeyer, who you'll hear from a little bit later today when he gets to come up here and take the microphone for the latter half. Our amazing AV team, we have Cam and we have Ash, our catering team who just somehow keeps all that water full out there and coffee and tea, and so many others, our security and everyone who makes these events possible. So thank you everyone for doing that for us. I also want to thank another important person who you're going to hear from today, and I'm going to introduce here, but our partner in this two-part series is Alan Best with Big Pivots. And I'll get a chance here to introduce Alan in just a minute, but we're really grateful for Big Pivots working with us to put this two-part series together. As you can tell, it's called Liquid Courage. Obviously, we are not passing around shots for you all this morning, so a little bit too early for that. But we came up with this title because we know how dire water is and how threatening it can be and how serious and how at times it feels like there are no solutions. And we know that there's a lot of conflict when we talk about water. We are in a water crisis. There is no way of sharing that across the West. We have been. We can see this with the grass browning across our neighbors, and hopefully they are being a good job and not watering their lawns or getting rid of their grass. We can see this when we drive by those low reservoir water levels or the creek that has barely a running stream in it and you should be flowing at a much faster pace than it is. We can see this in that smoky air that's out there, right? These are being exacerbated because of the aridification and the drought that's happening, because of our warming climate. It is really important to think about the interconnection of all of our systems when we think about how do we manage water here. So we did a survey recently, and we heard from the majority of our people who are connected with us that this issue of water is one of the most critical ones that they think we should be talking about. And so many of you are in that room. We heard this from policymakers and decision makers. We've heard this from our supporters and friends, and we've heard them from many others. So that's why we're hosting this. A few years ago, we hosted a really deeper dialogue, a convening series, where we brought together 15 or 20 diverse thought leaders across the space here. A couple of them are in this room with me right now. And we asked them to try to envision what 2050 would look like if we didn't have, quote unquote, any sort of water wars. how you were managing a system where you had aridification, you had a change in climate, you had this population demand across the West. And what's really interesting about that convening is while we didn't come up with any brilliant solutions because of how complicated this work is, what this group came out with was a guide and a roadmap to better decisions. And sometimes it's really important to think about the processes of how we make decisions if we're actually going to make change and come up with some really good, courageous ideas to help solve some of this. The other thing to note is that we are making progress in our water things. And I think most of us will read the media and we'll hear things and we know how dire a situation is, but we have actually been making progress. And there are really smart solutions and ideas out there, particularly across the West, but also across the US and internationally. And our folks, both in this panel and in our next panel, are going to be sharing what they think are some really bright, hopeful solutions at times, ideas that work between how do we think about policy and how do we think about community engagement, and how do we think about technology and all the things that come together to make some of this possible. So I am really excited to introduce the first part, which is going to focus on our urban, suburban, and mountain communities as it relates to water. And part two, which you'll hear about a little bit later today when we close, is going to focus more on solutions related to agriculture, which we know here in Colorado is a significant source of our water use here in the state. So with that, I would love to introduce our host and guide for both of these series, Alan Best. Alan has been a journalist in Colorado since 1970. Since 2020, he's been producing an e-journal called Big Pivots. I encourage you, if you have not subscribed to this and don't read Big Pivots, and I know there's probably some people in this room do, subscribe. It is really great. He chronicles the energy and water transitions largely across the state of Colorado, and he's won multiple awards, including a recent for his series in 2024 about water and urban landscapes in Colorado. And when I came across Big Pivots a number of years ago, I actually didn't realize it was started in 2020 because I think I came across it around that time. It was what I needed as an antidote to some of the other things that I read, because he goes deeper and he really talks in a much deeper length about some of these really hard, sticky things we're talking about in a really accessible way. And so it's great to read our news and our media and get this sort of snapshot of what's happening. And then I turn to Big Pivots to go a little bit deeper. And I'm never not disappointed in the writing that you do, Alan. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Alan. He's going to introduce our panel. Thank you all so much for being here today. I am thrilled for the brilliance that we're going to be hearing from and excited to have you all join us. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Kristen, and thank you to the Institute for the invitation to be part of this critical conversation. Empty spaces define the American West, but in fact, nearly 90% of us Westerners live in cities, suburbs, and towns. In those places amid the mountains and the plains and the deserts must come the creative solutions in response to the water scarcity. This morning we will hear from water leaders from three very different places. What they all have in common is they are struggling with this issue that we're all aware of. It's in front of us every day, of water scarcity. On the western slope, the Eagle River originates in the Gore Range. It flows past Vail and Beaver Creek and joins the Colorado near Glenwood Canyon. Denver and the suburbs with which it shares water get 50% of its water from the western slope from Grand and Summit counties, and the balance of it coming from here in the South Platte River Basin. As for Las Vegas, it lies in the Mojave Desert, a place that gets just a little over 4 inches of rain per year. And Vegas also gets about 90% of its water from the Colorado River. I know these places in various ways. When I was kind of young and I was playing with the prejudice of where I was living on the western slope, little towns, I had a bumper sticker on my car. It said, "Damn the Denver Water Board." Now, for the last 28 years, I've been living in Arvada, where I get my water from the Denver Water Board. As for Las Vegas, during a trip there one December for the annual Colorado River Conference, CRUA, I rented a car for one simple purpose. I wanted to see how water is used in residential areas, in the yards and along roads and so forth. Well, if these places are very different, they all, as I said, have this urgency associated with water. Today we plan to explore elements of that urgency. First, though, it's important to recognize that there have been successes. These towns have done a lot, these cities, all the jurisdictions that are represented on the stage here today, they've all done quite a lot of work. But how did that happen? How do we change attitudes? Culture change is a very interesting topic, and we'll dive into that somewhat today. We also want to talk about conservation and its limits. There's a saying that you often hear, you go to conferences, you can't conserve what you don't have. So the question here is, does conservation look differently in different places? And finally, these people on stage with me, I don't think they think about water all the time, but they think about it an awful lot of the time. So the question here is, what keeps them awake at night? And also, the flip side of that, what excites them? The three people here on stage with me have all had distinguished careers, and they come, as I said, from very different places. They all are on the western landscape that, by the way, is warming and drying. Pat Mulroy comes to us from Las Vegas. There she became CEO of the Las Vegas Valley Water District in 1985, and then added on similar duties in, I believe it was 1991, with the Southern Nevada Water Authority. It's a larger organization. She has held those titles until 2014. She has not sat idle since then. For example, she was a senior fellow for the Brookings Institution. She also created Sustainable Strategies, a consulting firm that negotiates water agreements and assists in facilities planning. The company has a couple offices, I believe, including one about 3 miles west of here. Over the years, I've heard Pat speak, maybe 10, 12 times, mostly in Las Vegas, but also Phoenix, Boulder, Denver, and Vail. She is legendary. I just had somebody from the water community in Colorado here a few months ago say, well, he was telling me a story about, I had to follow Pat on stage. I had to up my game. She speaks very well, extemporaneously for 45 minutes in clear, coherent sentences that add up to paragraphs. I wish she had been my speech instructor in college. On my left is Alan Salazar, who is the CEO and manager of Denver Water, a role he assumed in 2023 following decades of experience in public policy. He's held senior leadership roles with former Governor John Hickenlooper, former Denver Mayor Michael Hancock, former Senator Mark Udall, plus a couple of other U.S. senators. That's all very impressive, but let me tell you what impresses me most about Alan Salazar. Here in Denver, we pride ourselves on being the mile-high city, right? Well, Alan started life twice as high. He was born in Leadville, elevation 10,200 feet. Some might say that life would be all downhill from there, but you look at his resume and he's done pretty well. Our third panelist, Siri Roman, is the CEO of Eagle River Water and Sanitation District. She arrived at that position as a licensed professional engineer and has more than 20 years experience in the water and wastewater field. I've been to Siri's office in Vail, because I used to have an office down the street when I was in the newspaper world. And this was long before she got there, by the way. But it sits right on Gore Creek. And Gore Creek can be absolutely wonderful. I almost also have to say that since I left Vail, that's been in the 90s, it's a different world. What really pops out at me is the challenges that she's facing in Vail and the Eagle Valley, the Vail Valley, if you will, are very similar to the challenges of the other panelists. So let's get to the questions. Just yesterday, on a Facebook post, somebody used the word dismal to describe what we had last winter. We had flows in the rivers, the Rio Grande and the South Platte, the Arkansas, and of course the Colorado, that are at the lowest ever or near the lowest ever. By March, we had peak flow, right? That usually happens in late May or early June. It's been coming up a couple weeks over the decades, but this year it was in late March in a lot of places. If you could tell it, it was so minor. And so then we had Denver Water and others announcing restrictions in March. And so the question here is, as we look into this very dry and hot summer, in just a few sentences, what does this summer look like? What does it feel like from where you sit now? Is there any different from what we've been through before? Who wants to take this?
I'll go ahead. First of all, thank you for inviting me. I always love coming to Denver, especially now that I'm a recovering CEO and no longer come to Denver as the protagonist from the evil lower basin. So it makes life a whole lot easier coming up here. This summer is different only because the cumulative effect of all the summers that went before has come home to roost. All the cushion we had is gone. I mean, it's one thing to have 2002 when you had a bad winter and Lake Powell started going down rapidly, but Lake Mead still had over 1,200 feet in it, right? We're now seeing the very real possibility that Lake Mead is going to go to 900 feet by next year, which means we're 10 feet above dead pool. Thank God Metropolitan has just put a tremendous amount of water back into Lake Mead. They sold water to the federal government. They're replenishing Lake Mead. But that's what the problem is. It's that it's never ending. And it's the rate of change is so much faster than any of us expected. We know climate change is real. We know we're living it. But no one expected it to move this quickly.
From my seat, I think that 2002 changed water in Colorado, and 2026 is going to change it completely again. A lot of our planning and assumptions are being challenged this year. For us, Alan mentioned, I mean, it was 80 degrees for 2 weeks in March. We had a terrible snow year.
80 degrees? I'm so sorry.
It's cool for you. But watching our very little snowpack, the lowest snowpack we had on record, melt out in March, nearly, was quite alarming to us. And then for us, we use our reservoirs, Eagle River Water and Sand. They're small, but they're mighty. But they weren't able to fill because the stream flows are so low. So all the planning that we did got challenged this year because the reservoirs couldn't fill the way we had assumed that they would. So for me, we're taking note this year and really kind of gonna reset and be like, okay, what does the planning look for the next horizon? And there's a lot of things that I think we relied on that we're not gonna be able to rely on moving forward. And so how do we get creative, looking at demand and looking at other solutions on how can we prepare to handle a drier year? The other thing I would just say is, statistically, they always say you won't get 2 years like this in a row. And I think just what you were saying, I don't think we can say that anymore. We can't really rely on the statistics because we're just seeing such abnormal patterns.
Alan, thanks for the introduction. And I think we're going to have Alan up here, so we'll have to keep track of who's who. As Alan mentioned, I come at this job not from years of experience as a water lawyer or as a water engineer. I've been familiar with natural resources issues from law school days, and that was what I started to do in government, but I'm basically a government guy with local, federal, and state political and government experience. And so with that as truth in advertising, I think this particular challenge is, as Pat mentioned, it's an accumulation, not an accumulation of neglect, because I think we've done some good things. We, just for context, Denver Water is responsible for delivering water to about 25% of the state's population. We use 2% of the state's water, and that has been pretty steady going back through the 1970s. That didn't happen by accident. It's because we took measures. My predecessor and Denver Water employees over the last 20 years have taken steps to use water more efficiently and with conservation in mind. But my former boss, you mentioned Mark Udall. I spent 11 years with Mark, and he was an advocate of protecting natural resources, an early advocate of awareness, public awareness around climate change. And he had a saying. He said, Alan, no matter how many laws we pass, no matter how many regulations we implement, Mother Nature bats last. And boy, is she batting. It's our responsibility now to, when we are up to bat, to deal with that reality. And it's going to take, I think, innovation. I totally agree that we're at a pivot point now that's different from 2002. It's more extreme. We had a heat dome that made the spring more difficult, and it's partly why our response from our customers has been a little lagged, because even though they're on water restrictions, the heat dome that we've experienced, the extremes in temperatures, have put greater pressure on water use. So it feels quite a bit different. Do I regret? Maybe I lost a lot of oxygen when I was a baby in Leadville. Caused me to go into the work that I'm in. But you want to be involved in work that's important and at a critical time. So I'm not by nature an optimistic person, but I am a hopeful one. And I think we'll be able to navigate this through. But I'm concerned that it's not going to be a one-year deal. It may be a several-year deal.
Thank you, Alan. I have to add something in this vein. We had news last week, I believe it was, from Ann Castle, who will be a panelist at the next session in August. And her group, we call them the Traveling Wheelberries, that the combined storage of Lake Mead and Lake Powell had reached the lowest level since 1957, before there was a Lake Powell. Well, we do need to recognize successes, and there have been a lot. And as I said previously, and when thinking of Las Vegas, it's easy enough to think of the Bellagio, of the fountains there, of the Wynn Golf Club, or the Desert Heat. It's perhaps surprising to learn that the success story of the Southern Nevada Water Authority has had over the last 25, 26 years. It's added 1 million people. It's now close to 2.5 million in population in Clark County. But the water use has not kept pace. It's in fact, water use per capita has declined by well more than half. Pat, what do we need to understand about the Las Vegas story?
To understand the Las Vegas story, you really need to understand what the Southern Nevada Water Authority represents and how the Southern Nevada Water Authority was created, and some of the things we did in creating the Water Authority, because it was foundational to give us the ability to have the success around conservation that we did. When we created the Southern Nevada Water Authority, we did it through a joint powers agreement, which under Nevada law, any two governments can come together and form a third government, bestowing upon it any and all powers that they themselves have. So the Water Authority has all the powers of the Water District, the cities, and Clark County. In doing so, foundationally, we threw away our priority water rights. We said they make absolutely no sense between cities. The notion that the city of Las Vegas could have water running down the streets while Henderson and North Las Vegas have nothing is preposterous. Because when you think about it, when does it matter that you have a priority water right? It matters during shortages. If you replace the notion of shortages and making your neighbor suffer more than yourself with a notion that we're going to share the burden together and we're going to have a joint conservation plan that overlays the entire area, and everyone's going to live by the same conservation measures, you achieve the same thing without the acrimony and without the hostility that always comes along when you have priority water rights. When we did that, it set the foundation for us when we needed it in 2002. Now, conservation is a journey, and we had started the journey very gently because, like you said, changing cultures is not easy. And in Las Vegas, the notion of drought-tolerant landscaping was rocks, a cactus, and a dead cow skull. That's what everyone thought that meant. When in 2002, we had that massive drought start to hit, and we knew that Lake Mead was going to start going down, and we knew that our water resources were shrinking, the first line of attack was conservation. So the entire valley got together, and we agreed on certain measures, predominantly to take grass out. The reason for that is that the only water we lose is the water we use outside. We recycle 93% of all our wastewater. If it hits the sewer system, it either gets treated and returned to Lake Mead as a return flow credit, which we can take back, or it goes to a direct reuse facility and that water gets delivered to golf courses because you can't use potable water on golf courses. That was number one. Number two was watering restrictions. You don't have to water your grass in the winter as much as you do in the summer, and no one knew that for some strange reason. So in the winter, you can only water 1 day a week. In the fall and in the spring, 3 days a week. And in the summer, yes, you can water 6 days a week, not 7, but not between 11 a.m. and 7 p.m., when all it does is evaporate. We tried some measures that failed. I never understood the emotional attachment that Southern Nevadans had to fountains. I tried desperately to get rid of fountains, only to be flogged summarily. So we backed off of that and said, you can keep your fountain if you'll remove enough grass to equal 50 times the amount of water that that fountain uses annually. Achieved the same thing. I achieved more than that, and they kept their fountain, and I kept my life. The other thing that's very dangerous is to get between a senior citizen and his car washing schedule. The pitchforks come out. So they don't want to take it to a car wash. Don't ask me why they don't like taking it to a car wash. My 80-year-old husband doesn't want to take his car to a car wash. It was impossible. So I said, as long as you use a shut-off valve on your hose, fine, wash your car. All that said and done, people began to get it, and I was shocked at the response we got from the community. The community wanted to participate. They wanted to help. Their biggest question to me everywhere I went was, what can I do to help? What can I do? Because we see it. Lake Mead is our backyard. We go out to the lake all the time. We boat on the lake. We swim in the lake. We can see that bathtub ring. To us, it's not hundreds of miles away like it is in Los Angeles. It makes a difference. Grass started coming out left and right. Wasn't mandatory. You didn't have to do it. We paid you at first $1 per square foot. As it got worse, we've raised it. It's over $2 a square foot now. And for many people, that's the financial difference between being able to take the grass out and redoing their landscaping and not being able to do it. Water rates changed, and now there were rewards for conserving water in your water rate, and if you used more than you should, you started paying for it a little bit more. All said and done, it was a huge success story. And it's been a journey that has now reached a point where I think we're going to be the example of what are the limits of urban conservation. My successor has had to make some really drastic changes to the conservation program in response to the ever-increasing drought. He had the legislature give them the authority to designate what is non-functional turf and mandate that it be taken out. He's in court. The reason for that is this non-functional turf. I always thought it was the grass in medians or in streetscapes. But the way they defined it, it also includes some community areas where you have old growth trees. You stop watering the grass, the trees die. Those people have taken the water authority to court now. My guess, unfortunately, is they're going to lose that suit, because I think they went a little bit too far. They also tried to force anybody who's on a septic system to hook up to municipal sewer so that we could get the return flow credits. The pitchforks came out. Those people had no intention of letting go of their septic systems, to where the health district and the elected officials have said, nope, we can't do that. And lastly, they have banned evaporative coolers. All cooling has to be dry cooled. Now here's the problem. It has never been done in an arid climate like Las Vegas. Yes, Saudi Arabia and the UAE and all those other countries use air cooled, but the humidity is enormous. There's no humidity in southern Nevada. Those air-cooled systems release 180 degrees of heat 24 hours a day. Talk about creating a heat island. So there's a big discussion going on right now. Let's just think about using the hybrids, which would use air-cooled during the cooler seasons and allow you to use evaporative cooling during the hotter seasons. The debate is going on. My guess is there will be some modifications made. Las Vegas is now becoming the place where water and power are colliding. And that whole notion that in order to generate power, you have to have water. And in order to have water, you have to have power. So where's that new fulcrum? Where's that new balance point? Where's that new tipping point? That's where we're at in our journey. And we're going to probably be the poster child for the limits of urban conservation.
Thank you, Pat. Very briefly, you've been a trendsetter. You've influenced other places. How strong has that influence been at this point, Arizona and elsewhere?
I think the influence has been pretty significant. People have recognized that that outside use of water has to be done very judiciously. And in California, they're actually taking grass out, which I never thought was going to happen. And they're taking it out in the Phoenix area. Tucson really was the first child that went out and started ripping up their landscaping. They were really the model for everybody else.
Thank you. Thank you. Alan, I'll take us back to 2002. I remember that summer, it was smoky like this year. We had the Hayman fire, 130,000 acres, as well as the coal seam and other fires. And sometime in June or July, there was a dedication of a statue. You could almost see the statue from here. It's the Martin Luther King statue, Well, I didn't go to the ceremony, but I did go later to see what it looked like. City Park was quite a lot of brown. There's a lot of brown grass, but right around the statue, it was green. Well, I had to figure out what was going on. I got down, the grass had been painted.
Steve Wynn did that to the palm trees when we had a cold winter and all the palms died. He went out and had them all spray painted.
Well, here's the takeaway from that summer is that the next winter was going to be bad too, right? We didn't get much snow in early 2003 until St. Patrick's Day. And then it snowed hard, 3 feet in Denver and 7 feet in the foothills. Of course, the crisis is over with. But here's what was interesting about all that was water use by Denver Water's customers did not bounce back up to where it had been before the drought. It stayed suppressed. And so the question is, why? Was it pricing, technology, messaging, regulations? Did they play a part? And very fundamentally, have we had a very fundamental shift in culture?
Well, I think the short answer, Alan, is all of those things played a role. That's the easy answer, but it's also the true answer. And to Pat's point, I think we know how to use technology. We can adjust rates for drought pricing. We can encourage conservation and efficient use. We can protect indoor use. We know how to do many of these things. The culture part and the public reaction, I think, is the part that we want to stay humble about. Mandates work in a crisis because people understand the crisis. They will remember what it meant to have the drought pricing and to go through the drought. So what we have is what you referred to as the next year, even though there's snow, people are still a little concerned about use. That's called the drought shadow. The unhappy consequence of a drought shadow for an organization like ours is that's revenue that helps to maintain the organization. We have 3,000 miles of pipe through our system. Something breaks every day. You have an obligation not only to worry about the environment and conservation use, but the infrastructure that people rely on, and that means investing in that infrastructure. So we have to, as I worry a lot about that drought shadow hitting our revenue because we have responsibilities to take care of the system. But it gets back to managing the cultural expectation of people. Folks don't want to think about their water use. They turn on the tap, they expect it to be there, and nobody in the water utility world that I know likes to be in a headline at all. We really appreciate being taken for granted. But I think that is changing, and I'm hoping that it will change in a positive direction, that we'll have the opportunity to take a drought like the one we're experiencing now and use it to educate people. To Pat's point, people do want to contribute. They want to be part of the solution. And you've got to figure out ways to let that happen, but also to know what the limits of your authority are. And you need to work in collaborative ways and public messaging. Very proud of Denver Water employees who, on their own, not paid to do this, created a viral video 2 years ago based on a Backstreet Boys song. You may have seen it, and it went viral across the country. People were really pleased with it. The only negative review we got was on Gutman on Fox News for some reason. Thought it was
Shocker.
Really, I was really disappointed in that. But it went viral. It was about $3 million worth of free media, because people were into it. They appreciated. The employees were enthused about it. It was catchy. It wasn't beating somebody over the head. So in addition to being a water utility, I think we have to also start to think about our responsibilities to be good public communicators and educators, and it's that psychological, cultural piece that I think is maybe our saving grace.
Alan, this year, Denver Water, for the first time in 20 years, implemented drought pricing, charging more per gallon above essential indoor use. The goal was to reduce water use by 20%. Yesterday, the Colorado Sun reported that water use is down only 2%. 3 questions. Are we right to be shocked at only 2% reduction when the goal was 20%? Second, how much of a pinch does this put you in? And third, what comes next?
Well, I think I'd rather talk about the 2% that we use and the 25% of the population we serve. But I think we were disappointed by that 2%. I also think that it's the beginning of the process, and I think that number will improve. Our reservoir levels actually are better today than they were in the drought in 2002, so we've learned a lot about how to manage these circumstances. One advantage that my counterpart in Aurora has, Marshall Brown, and I was talking to him about this last week, is that you guys are doing a really good job of enforcing the drought restrictions. Aurora, some years ago, invested in advanced metering infrastructure, which basically means you've got a technology-based solution in your meter. Instead of having meter readers come out and test, there's the ability to immediately know what everybody's using. Some infrastructure that I think we ought to consider. The issue for us is when you make that investment and what are the trade-offs for that investment. We made infrastructure decisions some years ago, or my predecessor did, I think wisely, to do 3 things. Invest in expanding capacity. So if you know about the Gross Reservoir expansion in Boulder County, you know that's what that's about. Second, to invest in the next generation of water treatment facilities, and we have a state-of-the-art water treatment facility that was just completed a year ago, 2 years ago. And the third was maybe against self-interest and against what every lawyer would have said at the time, to replace the lead service lines in people's homes. Now, people are responsible for their own service lines, so the Denver Water could have taken the approach, hey, you're on the hook for replacing your service line. And there are technologies and chemical ways of addressing the lead service issue. But Denver Water made a decision to invest in the replacement of those service lines. Now, maybe in retrospect, maybe we should have thought about AMI, advanced metering infrastructure. You have these trade-offs. I talked about the infrastructure challenge of our pipes. The state-of-the-art or the industry standard, what you want to get to in terms of replacement of your infrastructure, is to have at least 1% of your infrastructure get ahead of the replacement so you don't have breaks. We've gone from 0.30 about 20 years ago to 0.70 today. I need to get it up to 1%. But again, it's an infrastructure investment decision. What do you defer? What do you wait to pay for? What do you take on? So I think my answer to the question, Alan, is yeah, we'd like to see that number get higher than 20%. I think we'll get there. I think the public is understanding the gravity of this circumstance. And the enforcement of it really is on us. People think that the city of Denver, the police department, enforces water restrictions. They don't. We don't do that. So we're really trying to do this in a way that is, again, getting back to the culture.
Thank you. Siri, when I was in Vail forever ago, we had some big newspaper issues at Christmas time. One year I remember I said, we're bigger than the Rocky Mountain News, if many of you remember that newspaper. We ran well more than 100 pages on one issue. First week of May, completely different story. You know, you could have homeless people on Bridge Street and they would be undisturbed. I think things have changed somewhat, but you still have that swing that a lot of, like, I don't think Denver has that same sort of swing at all. I believe that one of the statistics that has come up is that there's a swing of 700% in usage between peak times and non-peak times. In addition to part of that bigger story is that you also have a lot of affluence. And the affluence plays out in different ways. You know, you have people there that's just a few weeks a year or a few days perhaps. You have people that don't actually turn on their own water faucet. You have property managers. You also have the sort of wealth that, well, money is no problem. Vale Daily recently had a story, I believe, about one house using as much as a hotel, just one house. So that obviously presents some challenges of management. How do you deal with that? What kind of context do you have, and what has been successful, and what are you thinking about going forward?
I think one area we're very lucky, and Pat kind of mentioned this with the residents of Las Vegas being so connected to Lake Mead, is that you come up to Vail because you're going to recreate on water in one form or another. That's why people come, is they value whether it's the rivers or the skiing, Nordic skiing, hiking. So I think that that's what we had with us, is that people actually were very much paying attention that it was a terrible snow year. This year, we knew very early that we were going to have a really hard year. So in January, we were already talking internally that there weren't going to be enough snowstorms that could get us out of this. In February, we started to reach out to our towns and all of our partners, our metro districts. March, we really went, I've done dozens of presentations. I think the beauty of our community is that the way we've found success is really from the inside out. So going to the metro districts early, going to the towns. Town of Vail had already bought all their annuals. And we said, you can't plan them. You know, this isn't the year. We need, and they've responded amazingly. Really, what I've seen is the success is that everyone understanding the why and that we're in this together. And that's the only way we're going to be successful, is if we all do our part. And I will say that's the hope I have, is that people got it. You know, they understood that we're at the headwaters, that we didn't get the snow, we don't have the water. And I would say out of hundreds of conversations, maybe one or two were resistant. So, sorry, Alan, our water reduction is 24% down. And if you drive up to Vail, you see it. Everything is beige. You get off at the Vail roundabouts, there's no flowers, there's signage to let our visitors know this is protect Gore Creek, protect Eagle River. We don't want the water on your lawns. We want it in our streams. We want it for the aquatic health. So Beaver Creek, Town of Vail, Town of Avon, Singletree, Cordillera, you name it, all of them are down with their outdoor watering, and everything looks beige. It looks terrible, but that's pride to us. And so, it's not green, it's brown. Everywhere is brown. But what the beauty is the change that we're trying to make, because we're not going to get out of this next year, is that don't change your turf this year, because that's going to take more water. Let it go dormant. But really embrace what the native landscaping looks like. So for us, that's not going to be, what is it?
Rocket cow skull and a cactus.
I knew she was going to say that. That's not what we're saying. It's not going to look like Arizona, but it can be beautiful with lupines and columbines and our state flowers and natural grasses. And all you have to do is go hike a little bit up the hillside and make your lawn look like that. And protect your trees. Please, it's so hot. That's where we want the water to go, is to the trees, to the rivers. And then for us, a lot of our success too was working directly with Town of Vail. You know, Ford Park is quite a gem. And they said, we need to water it a little bit more than, what you're asking. And we said, okay, you can water a little bit more, but what are you going to cut back in other locations? Because functional turf, if kids are playing soccer, we want to see that. Lacrosse, soccer, we want to see it, the water where it should be. but not in our lawns. So I am so moved by our community, the reduction that we've done. Every single community has had meaningful reductions. We have worked really closely. We call them our excessive users. So let me ask one question. How many people know how much water they use a month? Max, you did say it was an educated audience. That's the best I've seen. So for us, it's if you use over 30,000 gallons 3 months or more a year. We've started this since 2023, reaching out to them. And to Alan's point, it's been come with us. You know, what's your why? My director of finance, his why, he's like, I'll find their number. But finance, money doesn't mean a lot, to your point, for this demographic. They don't see the bills. So for me, the why is Gore Creek. I live near Gore Creek. I cold plunge every day. Now it's a warm plunge, unfortunately, because it's so low and warm. But for us, we've really been methodical of working with our community. What's your why? How can we support you? Come with us. How can we make this a positive thing to make the change, to really care for the valley that we all love? But let's not make it look like where we come from. Let's make it look like Vail. And so water use is down 24%. Outdoor irrigation is down 41%. We are at a 2-day-a-week water reduction. This is one thing that I think there's some pressure when you go to 1 day a week, and I said, we're not. We couldn't ask our community to do better. They're doing fantastic, but follow the data. Don't go by just 1 day a week. I know that if we were to go to 1 day a week, it would be less efficient. People would increase their run times. And then operationally, we have to, we're risk managers. We have operations. We have over 47 tanks. And to run those 2 days a week for watering, because you're either an odd day or an even day, is challenging for operations. But I was like, we're going to hold. We need our community to hold. And if they continue to do this great job, which if you go up, you'll see it. It's beige. Then we're going to keep it 2 days a week watering. So I really hope that the state, instead of just saying, how many days are you watering? They're talking about the data. What's your reduction? That's what we want to see. One last thing, and then I'll stop. We are on advanced meter technology, and I think that's really important because our customers can have almost direct time. They can get online and see what their use is. And then there's also algorithms that can project your use for the month, because we do have pricing signals. We do, if you use more than 18,000 gallons per month, your water is going to be more expensive. And so we have a lot of people that are getting on there very frequently because they want to stay in tier 1. They want to stay in tier 2. And I think giving our community access to the data so they can make their decisions is very important. The last thing, landscapers and property managers have been our greatest advocates. So because some of these homeowners are only there for a couple weeks a year, the people that are doing the work are the landscapers, the property managers. They're telling their customers, we're in a drought, you can't do this. We have to keep you using this much water. We're going to turn off this zone, changing the expectations. I had one landscaper stop me and say, Siri, I have to fire a client. They're not getting it. So really it's that passion to the watershed and the community. And it's really holistic, and it's coming from the people.
Siri, you go to the Colorado River Basin Roundtable, I suspect, occasionally, and the other conversations on the Western Slope. The question here has to do with permanent drought restrictions. Now, we talked earlier about how Denver's water use did not bounce back because the culture had changed. But is this an opportunity? Is this something that maybe what you're doing this year in the Eagle River Valley that you might want to tighten up, continue? Or do you think others should be doing that too?
I think so we've seen our greatest users, tier 5, that's gone down 77%. So very few people are getting into tier 5. I think that we'll get to the end of the year. We need to really look at the data, look how our excessive users. I think we'll be just reaching out to, directly to the people that are using excessively, to try to see how we can collaborate and do this together. I do think there's going to be some, what I'm afraid of is the overuse of the word, I kind of say aridification of the West. Times are changing. It's not a drought and we're going to get out of it. It's a new way of living. So really, I don't see a permanent drought pricing, but our tiers are always evolving. That tier 5, 1,000 gallons is over $35. So it's very expensive as you use more water. We'll continue kind of dialing in the numbers based off of the use, based off of the patterns, and really with a legal rational nexus, which we have that obligation to our community. So I think I want to continue come with us and doing it in a positive framework because we're seeing positive change. Of course, there's going to be a few bad actors, but how much time do we want to spend with those versus working with the willing? And so I think that we'll evaluate after. This season's going to give us a lot of information.
Thank you, Siri. We've been talking much of this morning, actually, about behavior change. And I'd like to dive down a little bit deeper on the marketing aspect of that. Denver Water has been recognized across the country for its social media campaigns. One of them has been Use What You Need. Yet this year, Denver has turned to mandatory restrictions of drought pricing. This raises the question that we've been talking about how far voluntary appeals can take us. So where is that fine line between inviting people to do the right thing and requiring it? And when exactly do you know when the time is to cross that line?
Well, it's a great question, Alan, and I think we have to, there's no metric around it. It's understanding where people are, what their capacity is, what the economic challenges are in a community. I would be concerned about kind of a permanent drought pricing and restrictions to jump ahead of where people are. There are economic consequences. People do worry about the value of their property. So you want to try and create programs, I think, that not only educate the public, I think Denver Water's led in that space, also to support legislation like the state passed a couple of years ago around non-functional turf. We've led that effort. Collaborating with municipalities all along the Colorado River in a memorandum of understanding to reduce non-functional turf in our urban environments. I see Happy Haynes, former Parks Director in the Hancock administration, leading the effort to make the city more aware of climate strategies, and not only just in water, but also in energy. Providing free seed for folks who want to do their own landscape changes. Garden in a Box, we do that kind of program. Expanding the opportunity for people who are in a low-income circumstance that won't have the ability to do that without some help. Preserving affordability programs around essential use. Getting people to understand that this will be a trajectory that will take some time, and to do it in a way that is consistent with the environment that we live in. Started a program with Mayor Johnston a few weeks ago, ripping up the turf around City Hall and replacing it with what we call Colorado-scaping. It's a small thing, but it's also a demonstration that it works. Working with Riverside Cemetery, which is one of the oldest cemeteries in the state of Colorado, fell on hard times because it did not have water use. And if you've been to the cemetery, you know it's a historic place. We're working with the cemetery to have a landscaping project to beautify that cemetery, but in a way that doesn't, is water-wise. So I think it's a number of steps. When you know whether or not to, exercise the hammer, I guess is what you're asking. When does the mandate happen? When does the alarm bell go off? I think we're in that space right now where we have to understand that we've got to think about there is no exit ramp on this. We're going to have to change the way we look at the use of water and energy. And throw data centers on top of that and the changes with AI. I mean, there's a lot of things happening in the economy that I think are going to be additional challenges. But I think the other point I would make is to try and do this work without pointing fingers. We have, as I said, 2%. We use 2% of the state's water. We provide water for 25% of the state. The big grass problem on the Front Range is what we've been talking about. But we also have a grass problem in agriculture. Pasture, alfalfa, growing crops that probably don't make sense for this part of the world. And I don't say that with a finger pointing to, because I think it's very difficult to make a living as a farmer or rancher. And I have members of my own family who have made their living that way. But it's not to point a finger at the 80%, but to say, how do we collaborate in a way that we're all using this resource more efficiently and also maintaining the standard and the quality of life and the economy that we want to see. But we have to have a conversation that is about the whole of our communities and not just one.
Agriculture is a fascinating topic, and we'll be talking about it in depth a month from now. I would love to follow up on that right now, but let's go ahead and give Pat an opportunity. You talked a lot about, in the Las Vegas story, about the many tools you used. Are there more tools that you would want to talk about that are instructive in this conversation?
First, I got to say a couple things. I'm sitting here ready to explode. What do you think a large water bill is in the Denver area? Alan? Cost-wise, what's a large water bill?
In Denver or the service area? The city of Denver is different than our service area.
Your service
but in the
area.
city of Denver,
Your service area.
150.
Okay, I don't have a blade of grass at my house. Not a blade. I have all drought-tolerant landscaping. My bill is $1,200 a month. The people in southern Nevada who aren't doing what they should be doing are paying $30,000 to $40,000 a month for water. So I can't, if I could just pay $130, I would be a happy camper. The extraordinary pricing, and it doesn't work. Pricing alone just flat doesn't work. It just makes people mad. That's all it does. It infuriates them. I was so mad when I got my water bill. I called my successor and ate him for lunch. I was furious. It just invokes this visceral reaction. And one of the things the AMR system works really well with, though, is leak detection. We have it in Vegas, and the minute I have a leak, I get an email. If they see that the water's been running continually, you get an email. It says, you got a leak somewhere, you better go find it. So in order for the cultural change to happen, you have to be the partner of your community, not the one with the whip in your hand and going after their pocketbook and making them do things that they don't want to do or aren't ready to do. I mean, granted, Vegas is this weird place. The largest customer in southern Nevada is the Sultan of Brunei. Take a guess how much he uses. 14 million gallons. Now, what would you like to charge the man that has $500,000 front doorknobs? You can't. He doesn't care. They just write the check. You don't get anywhere. I think Alan was absolutely right. You have to raise the level of understanding, and it's through constant dialogue. Go to every community group, speak to the community, show them what's going on, explain to them what's happening. That constant, repetitive conversation is probably the biggest key and the most effective tool that you have, and that is to be out there communicating constantly with your community, because people will change if they know there's a reason why they have to change. Change is anathema to people, and the older we get, the less we want to change. Trust me. But tell me why I need to change. What is it that I am doing that if I do it differently will make a significant difference? Then people will react. Then they will step up to the plate. I've become absolutely allergic to pricing being this panacea that's going to create this instant efficiency. It doesn't. It just infuriates people. So, there you have it.
Hey, Pat, can I tee off of that for just a second?
Sure.
Do you think the price of water, the market for water, do you think it reflects, is it reflected accurately as a resource that we use and depend upon?
You're going to get the worst debate under the sun. There is this constant debate between water, the economic commodity, quote unquote, and what it should be valued at, versus the group that says water is a basic human right and I have a right to water. I can't exist without it. When we had to start charging more because we built a $1 billion third intake into Lake Mead, which is the only thing that's providing water to Southern Nevada right now, people were getting a little upset about the pricing. And they said, water is a basic human right. And I said, I agree with you. Here's your bucket. Go to Lake Mead. Knock yourself out. Take all the water you want. What you don't have a basic human right to is billions of dollars of infrastructure that gets that water, treats that water, and delivers that water to you. That's what you don't have a basic human right to. So it's a very delicate balance. It's the strangest commodity on the planet because it's not really a commodity. It doesn't live in the commodities market. And I'd rather strangle the next economist that gives me the commodity speech because it just doesn't ring true.
Pat, you mentioned the third straw, the tunnel that comes up from the bottom of Lake Mead, and you were a champion of that. The cost of $1 billion, if I have my information correct.
I had the scars on my back to prove it.
That's big infrastructure. Hoover Dam's big infrastructure.
It was only $435 million.
Do we need more big infrastructure?
Oh.
And let me add another question to you. In Vail a few years ago, you spoke about the need for desalination. And already we have desalination in various places, but most prominently in San Diego. Allows them to take water from the ocean, and they don't need to take as much water, if any, perhaps, out of the Colorado River.
Oh, they still take from the
Or
river.
do they? Well, what are our solutions? Are there limits to conservation?
There are limits to conservation, and I've never sat on a one-legged stool because anybody that says conservation is a panacea and is going to get us out of this is crazy. It is a balancing act between 21st century infrastructure and viewing 21st century infrastructure differently, conservation, and adding to the resource. I've reached the conclusion that for the lower basin has a responsibility to the upper basin by diversifying where the water comes from, to take the pressure off the river and stop this silly talk that's been going on the river. To do that, why does the federal government not create a lower basin commission made up of the states and the federal government that has one responsibility and one only? And that is they have the financial resources and they have the ability to hire engineers and scientists. They have the ability to have bilateral conversations with Mexico, and they need to find ways to augment the system predominantly through desalination. You can bring water in from northern Mexico, northwest Mexico, bring it into the Imperial Valley. You don't have a high lift. You build an inland desalter using geothermal resources. The cities pay for IID to use that water, just like they do in Israel, and they send their treated wastewater to the Negev and don't use potable water. And then IID leaves water behind in Lake Mead for the cities that paid for it. That's the future. You can't say to IID, we want you to cut half of what you're growing, or cut half of the water use that you're currently using. You're destroying communities. You're destroying family farms. It's a ridiculous argument, a ridiculous fight. But work with them. Let's build the desalination facilities. There is science out there that shows you can build them, and you can build them safely without destroying the marine life that's near. Is it going to cost money? Yes. We build hotels that cost $5 billion. And we're choking on building infrastructure that we need to live? We're building $12 billion airports. Seriously? And we have these apoplectic seizures if we crossed, $900 million to build a desal facility and put in the necessary infrastructure so that we can become sustainable in an aridified West. Make those changes and know that you will not use your infrastructure 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. And then if you don't use it all the time, it's not stranded infrastructure. You have to be adaptable. You have to be flexible. Use it when you can. Leave it alone when you have to leave it alone. That's the future. It's a very complicated, but actually pretty simplistic way of looking at how we use our facilities and our water resources. And if everyone else in the world can go to the ocean, what in the world is wrong with us? We're supposedly the most sophisticated country in the world, the most advanced, and we're sitting here paralyzed. Now that I'm on my soapbox.
You've been on this soapbox for a while.
Well,
on that
yeah, and
topic.
let me take it one step further. I'm furious with the federal government at this point. Yeah, I know, for other reasons, right? In 1944, when Congress signed the treaty with Mexico, Congress had ratified the treaty with Mexico. In it, they gave Mexico 1.5 million acre-feet. In that legislation, the Congress of the United States commits to the 7 basin states that it will replace that 1.5 million acre-feet. They've never done it. Ever. So I can't get upset to say, federal government, pull out your checkbook, meet your obligation, meet the commitment you made to the states decades and decades and decades ago, and help us solve the water shortages that are currently happening. And you, federal government, were a part of it. I'm not saying Mexico doesn't deserve a portion of the Colorado River. Don't get me wrong. But if you want to talk about a structural deficit, that's where the structural deficit happened. That was step number 1 in the structural deficit journey. So let's fix it. We're not going to take it away. Let's help Mexico, help the United States, and let's finally get off the damn dime.
Pat, I know you don't want to be controversial, but I want to throw, because you're tweaking something in me that is also, boiling up. And it's not just the cost of infrastructure, but it is our own well-meaning and well-intentioned efforts to protect the environment and protect public safety and to stop abuse. And I've been part of it.
You're a lawyer.
This is true. But part of the effort to make it almost impossible to build infrastructure even when you have money. And the story I tell is a personal one. When I started to work in the 1980s for a U.S. senator. And Two Forks was the preferred, was the dam that was supposed to be, you probably know about it. If you don't know about it, it's great history, but the idea was for Denver Water to build Two Forks Reservoir. And long saga, but the Environmental Protection Agency, under the Bush administration, Bush 1, canceled that project. But it was very controversial in Colorado in the 1980s and when I was coming up. And the senator I was working for proposed, along with the environmental community at the time, that instead of building Two Forks, why doesn't Denver Water just simply raise the dam they already have from the 1950s, the Gross Reservoir in Boulder County? That was the preferred alternative of the environmental community at the time, of which I was a part. Fast forward, 20 years later, Denver Water decided to do just that, but we're in federal court now. We've been given permission to finish the construction, but with the potential of an absurd result that I hope does not come out of the courts, that we can complete the construction, but we can't fill the reservoir.
Why would you complete the construction?
Committed, investment, bonded, all of that, extraordinary engineering, collaboration with the community, creation of an environmental pool, all of these things. And it's 20 years. I think in addition to the financing, we have to be thoughtful about and self-reflective and self-aware to think should we look at the way we regulate and the litigation challenge of infrastructure in this country is a serious one. So I'm part of that abundance crowd that gets himself into trouble. But I do think this is an amazing and important opportunity, and it may not, people may not think it's related to the drought. It is completely in the centerpiece of the drought, because we're going to need infrastructure to get ourselves out.
There's a great book called Unbreakable, written by a guy named Dan Wang, that compares the economy of the US with the economy of China. And he reaches one conclusion. The reason the Chinese actually get infrastructure built and we can't, Chinese government is made up predominantly of engineers. We're made up predominantly of lawyers. They get things built, we don't. It took the Carlsbad desalter that you mentioned 10 years to get permitted. 10 years. And the last lawsuit was from the surfers, who for some crazy reason thought it would change the way the waves came in. I don't know. It was nuts. Absolute insanity. I have a great story how you get around it. We lined the All-American Canal. One of the things that came out of the first round of negotiations between the states and the QSA in California was that San Diego would pay to line the All-American Canal that brings water to the Imperial Valley and take the 60,000 acre-feet of seepage savings and be able to use that in San Diego. Everybody agreed, everybody signed on. The bulldozers were sitting on the All-American Canal, ready to go to work, and someone filed a lawsuit to stop it. So I went to Harry Reid, who was Senate Majority Leader at the time, and I had him insert a little sentence into a reconciliation bill that said the Secretary of Interior shall line the All-American Canal. It was no longer discretionary. It was the law of the land. The lawsuit was dead. It's the only way we got that canal lined.
Pat, before we move on to the next question, I'm kind of curious how much traction your idea of the desal has gotten.
People they're paralyzed. They're afraid to even talk about it because the minute you start talking about it, all the groups that are opposed to it for one reason or another, many of them are driven by growth-related motivations, start screaming, oh, it's going to cost so much, oh, it's going to destroy the environment. How can we say it's going to cost too much when we don't even know what we're going to build?
Alan, on kind of the same vein, you have a lot of federal experience and past talking about a larger federal role or a different federal role. Do you have any read on that, about where the federal government should maybe come in on this?
Desal issue?
Yeah, the broader issue that Pat had brought up with her idea.
Well, I 100% agree with Pat. She will know more about desal than I do. We don't, but for relieving some of the pressure on the Colorado River, it's always struck me as an important thing to do. We have to think in the same way around energy. And for a long time, I was a skeptic of nuclear energy. I'm no longer a skeptic of nuclear energy. There's no easy way out, and there's no pain-free way out, and there's no way to avoid risk. It's simply a question of how you move through a list of difficult choices. And I think if you want to be opine on the Colorado River, I'm not gonna do that, Alan, in advance of what the feds say. But I think there are some technological and investment opportunities that we should think about. I don't know if this administration will do it, but I hope that there's some appetite for it.
Well, moving on to the final set of questions, Pat has talked about the idea that we have a common fate in the river system. We've talked about tensions this morning. We've talked about some elements of collegiality. But given the different geographies, the different hydrologies, the different climates, the different histories, I'd like to explore that from the different perspectives. And Siri, you're at the very top of the system. The snow melts, and it's there an hour or two later, running past your office is water. When I lived there, it was hard to imagine Vail ever running out of water. But here we are. Does the idea of a common fate that Pat has talked about, the common fate of all those in this water systems, does it hold up from your perspective at the headwaters? When you look downstream or across the Continental Divide, do you feel linked in arms with your colleagues on stage here this morning? Is there a common fate?
Oh, absolutely. I think the only way we can get through this is all doing our part and all working together. We're all feeling the pain. You know, one of the saving graces for our watershed was that the Grand Valley irrigators curtailed their use so that we were able to put more water in Green Mountain Reservoir to the benefit for the historic users pool for a lot of us. So that was very moving to our community to see that our partners in Palisade and Grand Junction were waiting, curtailing their use early season. And I think that's the only way, and it's exactly what you're saying is, as you opened up and got applause about throwing out, I'm still amazed you were able to get rid of your appropriation dates. But, it's things like that we're going to have to work together on. I understand the water in Colorado is for the state of Colorado. We know that Denver has its right. But as we work through tough things, like the Shoshone water right is super valuable to the Western Slope. We're at the lowest stream flows on record. The Eagle River is below the in-stream flows 33 days earlier than we've ever seen it. And so I think that's what we're seeing is just that it's so, the flows it's so hot, the river is suffering, and so there's only so much water to give, but if we can, work together, I think that's the only way that we're gonna see a solution. And so common fate, absolutely.
Alan, the same question for you. As you provide water for 25% of Coloradoans, you're most prominent. You agency in the past has had people like me putting on bumper stickers. What special responsibility do you have as being the biggest in Colorado?
Well, I think it's, with some humility helps to understand that we are in it together. One of the first people that I met when I took the job at Denver Water was my counterpart, one of my counterparts on the Western Slope, Andy Mueller, who's the head of the Colorado River District, knowing the historic tension between the Front Range and the Western Slope. I wanted a personal and human relationship with Andy. I just use Andy as an example, but I could use county commissioners in Grand County and elsewhere. Outside of our service area, but we're dependent upon a positive relationship. And I've found, at least in my political life and government life, that you can solve problems better if you do have a personal relationship with people. Break bread with them, joke with them, josh with them, hang out with them. And so much of our problems as human beings are not just about metrics, not just about science, not just about financing, but about some commonality in creating relationships. Pat and I were talking about my predecessor, Jim Lockhead, who had extensive experience on the Colorado River as an expert on Colorado River policy. Part of the reason that Jim was successful with his colleagues is because he had personal relationships with Jim Keitlinger and others, right? And we were talking about and bemoaning the loss of that. So part of it is human relationships, trust building, and it's just at a very human level. On the policy level, Denver Water, we belong to Club 20. Just an example, small example. I make efforts to go visit with the county commissioners in our service area and outside of our service area. Try to be visible on the Western Slope. Talk about Shoshone. Denver Water was one of the few, I think we're the only Front Range entity that advocated for the federal dollars that are going to be used so the Western Slope can acquire the Shoshone water rights. We have some issues with it. We made our point with the CWCB, and some, we're going into water court, and we'll sort that out. But we're intending to sort that out in a collaborative way. One of the concerns I have, Alan, about the Colorado River controversy is that as we deal with that challenge, and when the politics doesn't seem to be working toward a solution, one of the worst things that we could do in Colorado is ignite the Front Range West Slope fight all over again. It's largely been contained, and I think we need to continue to contain it. So yeah, with great responsibility comes humility and a desire to collaborate. And it's what we do at Denver Water. We'll continue to do it that way.
He's absolutely right. I mean, the worst thing you can do on the Colorado River is say, we have a problem and it's your fault, which we love to do. And I cringe every time election season comes around, because there's nothing a politician loves more than to get on his white steed and defend his constituency against the hordes coming in from outside, right? Ridiculous. I mean, we're never going to get there if we keep this up. Keep pointing the finger at ag. Make statements like, half of agriculture needs to be taken out of production. Seriously? Have you looked at what the consequences of that is going to be? So he's 100% right. Know your neighbor. Know why he functions the way he does. What is it that's making him demand certain things? They're not doing it for no reason. Something's going on. Be able to understand that. Be able to make their arguments as well as you can make your own arguments.
And one final question I can think of, because it's come up in Colorado certainly for the last 50, 60 years, is, are there limits to growth? I mean,
Please don't start that.
yeah, got to.
There's only one city that's ever successfully controlled growth, and that's Boulder City, Nevada. They own every square inch of land within the city. And they only release X amount of land for growth every year. They're a federal charter city. How else, other than that, you don't really have the tools to control growth.
Alan?
She said.
You ran into that in the Eagle Valley, Siri?
Yeah, quite a bit. I think, so Eagle River Water and Sanitation District is a special district, and we're formed for the sole purpose of really water. And we operate across, for water and wastewater, 3 towns in the county. For me, I really think about we have to connect with land planning, and we have to work with our partners to go back to decisions that were made when water was very different in the early 90s and question things. So as far as, I think there's smart growth, and I think the way we maybe grew up, we have to go back and make some changes. And then sometimes mistakes happen. I mean, there's a hotel in Vail that has non-functional turf. I define it the way you define it, as a median. Or anytime you're walking on grass just to mow it, get rid of it. That's kind of what we say. If you're just going on it when you mow it, get rid of it. But this one, you can see it, it's right on the north frontage, and it has a bright green little median strip between the trail and the road. And all of us, including Town of Vail, how did that get through? Like, how did that get approved? So I think for me, while we're doing conversations with the metro districts, the towns, the DRBs, anyone who will listen to us, it's as equally as important with the decision makers in land planning, because a lot of code is very antiquated. And I tell people, even in established communities, Cordillera changed the amount of square footage you're allowed. They took it down on their own. And so that's what I'm kind of hoping to see, is that as people know more and understand that they're making those choices, that I understand that this is how the property rights were at this time, but it doesn't make sense. Let's change it. And then making sure any future development is indoor use only. We have water for indoor use. It's the outdoor use that with the high consumptive rate, that's what we need to change. So when you look at growth, not all growth is equated equally. So we just have to look at what kind of growth and how do we make that water last longer.
Thank you. And now we'll move into the final portion of the meeting. We'll have some questions and some more answers.
Great. Please join me in thanking our panelists. So I'm Max Newmeyer. I'm the Deputy Director for Policy and Engagement here at the Institute. We do have Slido up on the screen. I apologize that we didn't let you know at the beginning, but if you want to throw in a question for Slido right now, they are still open, and you also have the opportunity to upvote questions that you think are interesting. While you're doing that, I'll start us off. One person asked about water quality. Siri, Eagle River Water and Sanitation District has a gold medal fishery right below one of your wastewater treatment plants. You've said that protecting the watershed for the future matters as much as providing water for our users today. What does that look like in practice? How do you balance those concerns about water quality with getting people the water they need today?
That's a great question. So where our wastewater treatment facility is in Vail, when it was built in the late 60s, was the edge of town. And now we're located across the street from a Ritz-Carlton. So this is kind of how it works up in Vail. I would say the gold medal fishery starts at our outfall. And I think wastewater treatment, you won't find a greater environmentalist than the operators that run those facilities. You just look at the water coming in and the water going out. It's unbelievable how clean of water they make. And a lot of the parameters are actually cleaner than drinking water because aquatic life is more sensitive. So our operations staff is so acutely aware of the water quality of the receiving body, and then we have strict permits that we have to meet. I think that the gold medal fishery starts there because of our outfall. The nutrients that we all dispose of in our urine and our fecal matter, we remove that in our wastewater treatment facilities, but that actually provides, we need those nutrients there to live. creates a better aquatic environment, especially at the headwaters where there's nutrient limitations. This isn't the same once you get below ag, and as you go further down the water body, of course that changes. But since we're the first person using that water, that is why the gold medal fishery lives there. We're actually asking people not to fish now because the fish are very stressed because the water is so low and warm. But really, for me and Alan, I think you've talked about infrastructure. So much of our jobs is balancing risk. We know what to do, we just can't afford to do it all. So we really have to be looking at all of the risk, which is very much aging infrastructure, regulatory drivers, water supply, and then of course, employees and housing and all the things. But for us, I'm always saying, let's leave the organization better than we found it. And certainly when you look at water quality, it's directly connected to quantity. So for us, we're always working with CDOT on Vale Pass with mag chloride, sediment. From the Eagle River, we have the Eagle Mine, which will forever be a collect and treat water treatment plant with high metals. So there's risk all around us, but we just work with our partners collaboratively with the data to make sure that our source water is protected. Because the better the source water, the easier the treatment, the lower we can keep the cost for our customers so that we can reinvest in our assets. And that's really how we look at it, very holistically. We don't look at it as just one thing, your water right, or they all connect. And so for us, it's looking at the whole picture. A good example is like PFAS. There's so much of it in the news, and you almost get the sense that we're creating it in the plant, It's really like stop it at the source. All of these things, if you can stop it at the source, then you, our customers, aren't paying for us to remove it at the end. And that's a lot of the work that we're doing, is just making sure that we protect the source water quality. And we're lucky at the headwaters because we have such fabulous source water quality.
We have time for just one more audience question before we do a final round, and it will surprise nobody that it's about AI. The question is, what threats or opportunities do you see arising from the emergence of AI and data centers, and what strategies do you envision to accommodate it? And I'll just add, are there places you see AI aiding in your water operations? Alan, do you want to take this one?
I don't want to take it, but I will. Big topic, obviously. Way bigger than water. Global implications for the economy and culture. I scroll between the optimists and the doomsayers about what AI is going to do to us culturally and all of that. I think it's a responsibility for all of us to educate ourselves about what it may mean for us. Narrowing down just to the water utility space, two things. One, the tools are useful, and we use them. And in predicting leaks, for example, is probably one of the easier ones to point to. But I have 1,100 people who work at Denver Water. They have careers at Denver Water. And I want them to know that there are ways to be AI literate, not to push them out, not to get rid of their job, but to prepare them for their careers, to feel an obligation as an employer to our employees to do that. So there's that. I think of it in concentric circles. The way you use the tool, how you support your employees in the use of the tool, to have the right ethical protocols around the use of the tool, and then to think about what the broader implications are for society, data centers, energy use, demands, the water energy nexus that people talk about. It's going to come at us. And then the bigger, broader circle is, I have a 29-year-old son. I care about his future. He's going to be living in an environment that may be very, very different from what I'm used to, and what are we doing politically to create governance structures around AI. So big topic. One thing I'll close with this. I have a great passion for the message that Denver Water is an anchor institution. What do I mean by that? We are placed here in a permanent space, not just to deliver water, but to think about our broader obligations to support the prosperity of the community we serve. Not to get us away from our mission, but to broaden the aperture of what we're responsible for, at least contributing to. And in the AI space and in the data center space, I think water utilities should not be a siloed entity just worrying about the water implications. We deserve and ought to demand a seat at the table with government and others defining what that policy is, because we'll have to live with the consequences. So the anchor institution idea for me is we have an obligation. It's not just about water. It's about broader prosperity, including the people that work for us, including the people we serve. Give us a seat at the table as these policies develop.
Great. And a final question from each of you. I'd like you to give the audience one reason for genuine hope about water in the West, as well as one thing to pay attention to. Let's go down the line from Pat to Alan.
I'm a perennial optimist. No matter how frustrated I get and how much venom I spew every so often, I have a fundamental belief. I go back to what Winston Churchill said. Americans will always do the right thing, but not until they've explored all the alternatives. I am convinced that we're going to reach a point where the Colorado River community and the West realizes how fundamental the aridification and the change is. The necessary new facilities, new infrastructure will be built because it has to be. New attitudes will develop around water use because they have to. Change will come because it is here and people have to adapt, and they will. And so I really believe that if I won't be around, I know that, but when I look down the road to, let's say, when my granddaughter is in her 20s or 30s, I really believe we will have come a long way to changing the dialogue and changing how we view and how we react to infrastructure, to conservation, to water resource management, and our interconnection and our need for a larger collaborative environment.
I think the hope that I've left with is really what our community has demonstrated in the Eagle River Valley, is that people can make change when they understand the why, and it's their choice to make the change. So as I look in the future, it can be done. And then I think what to look out for is the convergence of the water rights, the water quality, the water supply. The solutions aren't going to be in one lane. It's going to be us working together to solve a lot of them. The best solutions are going to be the most efficient that consider all the concepts. And I think that the only way to solve these issues is to really put our heads together and get creative with the solutions, which is going to be questioning the regulatory framework, is going to be questioning some of the legal assumptions, and maybe putting down those strong-held rights for what's better for the whole state.
Alan, you get the final word.
Unlike Pat, I am not an optimist. I was born a pessimist. But I am hopeful. And I draw hope from the fact, look at the number of people who've shown up on a early morning to hear about the topic of water. I have a great deal of enthusiasm about the opportunity and the ability of people to work collaboratively to solve problems. My whole life has been about that. Some successes, some failures I've observed, but for the most part, people want to do the right thing, and they want to do it together. And I think that's true in water, energy, whatever public problem you have. I also draw optimism from the next generation, the younger people. I met with a group of young interns at the Denver Water last year, and it's still in my mind. 18, they were all women. There was not one man among the group. Young women who wanted careers in water science, water quality, watershed health, corrosion control. Who knew there was a degree in corrosion control? And I sat down with them, and they're bright, they're excited about their careers, they bring a sense of energy, and I thought, okay, the idea here is to get out of their way and make sure that there's a career path for them, and not to hold on to old views and old beliefs and old grievances. So I'm optimistic about that. And the other thing I would say, going back to our opportunity to educate people about water, so antithetical to the way we are structured. We don't want to be in the headlines. We don't want to be creating controversy. We want you to take us for granted, but I don't think we're in that space that we can continue in that way. So educating people about water, why it matters, why it's so critical to our future. And Alan, you do that all the time with your writing, and I want to give you a shout out for that because we need it now more than ever.
Great. Well, before we close today, I'm also pleased to extend to you all the very first invitation to our next session of Liquid Courage Water Solutions for a Drier West. This will be on agriculture and will be held on Thursday, August 27th at the same time here from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. This session will explore how agriculture can adapt to a drier West. We'll look at examples like crop switching, which is moving away from water-intensive crops to more drought-tolerant alternatives. And we'll look at producer-led conservation, in which ranchers and farmers voluntarily redesign their operations to adapt to a drier climate. This conversation will push back on the assumption that agriculture and conservation are necessarily at odds, but will also raise some hard questions about how we do this at scale. Our next session will include Robert Cicada, who is president of Cicada Farms, as well as senior advisor to the commissioner at the Colorado Department of Agriculture. It will include Ann Castle, who is a senior fellow at the Getches Wilkinson Center at CU Law, Nathan Combs, a board member of the Colorado Water Conservation Board and a farmer in the San Luis Valley, Sarah Jones, the co-founder of Rye Resurgence, and will be moderated again by Alan Best. So again, we hope to see you there. Registration is now open for that event on August 27th. And with that, please join me in thanking our panelists and our moderator one more time. Great. And you're welcome to stick around for a few more minutes and network. We also have a post-event survey. We'd love it if you could tell us how we did today and what we can improve for next time. And we look forward to seeing you again in August. Thanks so much.